You have to have this relentless approach, and you have to be okay with failing, and you have to be okay with never hearing back from somebody you've emailed 100 times because maybe your work just isn't going to work for their brand no matter how much you think it is. And you have to be okay with that. You can't let that affect your drive, and you can't let that affect self-discipline and the self-determination and the belief in yourself.
Welcome, Mark McInnis.
Yeah, Scott. Thanks for having me, man. I'm really pumped.
No worries.
It's been a while since I've done one of these. So,
yeah?
I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a real honor. I guess just to start off, because there's going to be a few people that may not have heard of you that are going to be listening to this that follow my stuff. So can you just tell us how it all began? Like, how does a young guy from Bend, Oregon become, in my opinion, one of the best surf photographers in the world? Like, how does it all happen?
Oh, that's too kind. I think there's a whole echelon above me, but I really appreciate the kind words. How does it happen? Well, I think for me it happened mainly because my parents split up when I was really young, and they met in Hawaii on Maui. And my dad essentially just moved straight back to Maui when I was a really young grom. And I started going over there to visit him every summer when I was really young. And I didn't really get into surfing till a lot later in life, but I fell in love with the ocean, just mesmerized by it. And we would always dive and spearfish. And so I had this really strong connection with the ocean at an early age. And then fast forward to 2004, and my dad actually lost his life in a shark attack in Maui. And I was completely rocked my world. And I sort of vowed to take surfing everywhere with me from that. Oh, and when I was 20 or something, I started surfing, and he passed away when I was 23. So then I was like, well, I'm going to take surfing with me everywhere I go. And so surfing kind of became this big passion of mine. And in a whole separate part of my life, I had started taking photos as a hobby, which quickly turned into a passion. And then, just one day back in 2008, I just kind of decided I wanted to blend the two, and here we are.
Yeah, awesome. And I think I've heard you mention before that so I have heard you tell that story about your dad, and then you had a stepdad, which apparently you don't like the word stepdad, but your other father, was he into photography or creativity a bit as well?
Actually, I guess he was creative from a business sense. He was a remarkable businessman. He was a problem solver, if there was ever a problem, his first thing to do was just find a solution. And I think he almost sort of loved it, loved finding solutions to problems. And a lot of the solutions were very creative, but I wouldn't say he was very creative in an art sense, but he is the one that gave me my first camera and photography class in high school. So he sort of kind of, fanned the flame.
Yeah, for sure. So can you talk then a bit about your photography style? So one of the things that attracted me to it the most, it's kind of when I first found Chris Burkard and then your work, it's this real kind of, I guess when I try and do it in my photography, I call it surfscape. So it's kind of, a wider image, maybe having a wave or a surfer as the subject, but within a wider landscape. It's not all just cropped in, magazine style surf photography. It's this kind of sort of a surfscape kind of style. So can you talk to me a bit about that, how that sort of came about? Is that a product of the environment, or is it just something that you like?
It's definitely just the product of the environment. Before I was ever getting paid for photography, or before I ever thought I was going to have photography as a career path, I was just solely into landscapes,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just always had a camera with me and always was shooting landscapes. And then being from the Pacific Northwest and living on the coast, the Pacific Northwest coast for a long time, it just sort of happened so naturally that my style kind of developed like that. Because there was really no other way I could have done it, because I wasn't working with surfers. So really all I had was lineups, and still to this day, that's my favorite thing. And it's sure, there's tons of beautiful lineups that have empty backdrops and everything, but it's such a
Yeah,
no-brainer when you have a giant cliff. I mean, it's just like
100%.
that Berkey photo behind you. Like
Yeah, yeah,
if he was down the beach 100 yards and just, it wouldn't be nearly the same. And granted, that's not a lineup, but you know what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. No, no, you mean, yeah, for sure. Well, I guess
I think, yeah,
before that, like,
it was just natural. It was a product of the environment.
yeah. And so because like I guess there's you're going to have like a few challenges like that with waves and weather and everything. Are you waiting for certain conditions to go out and shoot, or is it something that you've just always been like, I'm just going to go out and make the most of what's there, see if I can adapt to the conditions and create something?
Well, sadly, in the Pacific Northwest, we're blessed with very, very small windows of epic
Yeah.
conditions. So it's not one of those things where you're really like, oh, I'm just going to go out today and hope to get an epic lineup. You sort of have to
Yeah.
wait for the
Yep.
right conditions in those small little windows. So I definitely capitalize on those windows for sure. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably the same in any kind of more rugged, colder environment. You know, like we
Yeah. Yeah.
aren't fortunate to have, you know, 7 Mile Miracle trade winds every day.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Was there a moment when you, or like, I guess, a photo, like when you were starting out, when you were sort of going out and getting into this thing and sort of discovering like that you like the lineup shots and the backdrops, etc. Was there an image or a session or a moment where you were just like, oh yeah, like it just sort of clicked for you and like this is what I kind of want to continue to chase?
Yeah, there was. It didn't really have much to do with a location or a
Mm.
specific photo I had in mind. It was actually a day that before I moved to the coast, I was living in Portland for a few years and drove out to the coast to surf. It was beautiful conditions, but it was just a little out of my league. You know, it was like double
Yep.
overhead and like
Yeah.
just breaking on the sand. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
wish it was in my league, but it wasn't. I was like, oh, I'm just going to take some pictures, you know? And it
Yeah.
was this beautiful backlit afternoon, and the waves were like this emerald green, and it was howling offshore. And usually at this specific spot, it breaks a little bit further outside, but for
Mhm.
whatever reason, whether it was the tide or the sandbars or what, it was just like I said, detonating on the beach, and it just looked otherworldly. And I
Yeah.
got home that night and was editing the images, and I was like, man, this is kind of insane. Like, I think this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a surf photographer. So that
Yeah.
was kind of
Awesome.
there really was that one defining moment where I sort of made up my mind.
Yeah, yeah, unreal. And can you talk through? So you do a lot of commercial work as well, right? So for people that I guess are watching that are like photographers, maybe wanting to like get into the world of surf photography or just becoming, photography as a career, can you talk us through that process for you? Because obviously, doing something like photography, it's not the standard safe path. You know what I mean? It's like there's sort of a few challenges involved in it. So for someone that's
Mhm.
kind of like, this is my passion, I want to go out there and do this. But maybe it can appear a bit, dreamlike and easy than the process is. Can you talk us through like getting into that and sort of getting work and, becoming a photographer?
Oh man, I mean it's daunting. I was just having this conversation with a friend the other day where those early grindy days, are sort of the best. Like your freezer is just no joke, like stacked full of 99-cent
Yeah.
pizzas, and you're like buying the cheapest beer possible because you're young and all you want to do is eat pizza and beer anyway, so it all kind of works out.
Perfect. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, even still to this day, however many years in, 13, 14, 15 years in, whatever it is, it's still a lot of work. You
Mm,
have to commit to doing it. And if any, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of photographers I see on Instagram and other various places, and I'm like, how is this person's work not bigger? Like, how is this
mm,
person not more successful or whatever? And I think a lot of it just has to do with hunkering down and making it happen for yourself,
yeah.
being that guy that is annoying an art director or a creative director or a producer or whatever, or an agency. It's just like you have to have this relentless approach, and you have to be okay with failing, and you have to be
Mm,
okay with never hearing back from somebody you've emailed 100 times because maybe your work just isn't going to work for their brand no matter how much you think it is, and you have to be
yeah.
okay with that. You can't let that affect your drive, and you can't let that affect the self-discipline and the self-determination and the belief in yourself. And I think that's
Mm,
really, really very important. And it sounds a lot easier when it's coming out of my mouth right now than it actually is. It's hard to it's hard to stay motivated when you feel like you're failing,
Yeah.
but through those failures is where the lessons are that will help turn those failures into success, and it's so like cliche. It sounds like a motivational speech or something, but it really is just the
cliche
truth.
for a reason. But where do you think maybe that has come from? Is this like wisdom, if you like on the other side of doing, or where does that because some people would maybe approach a few people, get a few no's, and then not have that self-belief to kind of move on. So where do you think yours came from, or do you have any kind of advice of someone of how they can approach that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I am a very, very firm believer in everything happens for a reason. And I think that's because of certain things that have happened in my life where I don't really have a choice to believe that way. But, so yeah, if you try relentlessly and you don't get to where you want to be in a certain amount of time, and you go and you choose to do something else, that's fine. That's your path. That's your decision, and it's all good. But if you want to stick with photography or something creative, or creating your own business, I guess would be the same thing, really. It's just, I mean, I guess it is looking back on it from the other side, I guess, because I have found success and I do this. But it's something that I'm constantly dealing with as well. I want to work for certain brands still to this day that I can't get an email back from because maybe my work doesn't speak to, their current needs or whatever. So I don't know if it's belief in myself because I have found success that allows me to share these words with you, or if it's just well, this is what I'm doing and I'm not quitting and I don't know how to do anything else. So let's just keep at it,
You must have had it in the first place to be in this position to reflect on it. So yeah, that's really inspiring. So I guess on that topic, for people who know you, this sort of next story is obviously been well publicized over the last couple of years, but there's a lot of people who won't, and it's crazy inspiring and just insane story. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of the fire and everything that happened to you? Because I guess one of the reasons I want to touch on, and maybe it's you can direct with your answer, is a lot of people would sort of think about a hypothetical of something happening, right? You get insurance for your house because you're like, oh, what if something happens one day? And me and my wife were just talking about this the other day. It's well, I think our insurance bill came up, and we're just realistically, anything in our house that we care about isn't going to be covered by insurance, right? It's just it's all the important stuff. And yeah, people kind of think, oh, what would I do if that happened? And then now you've had to face it head on. So that was a long question, but to backtrack, can you give people a bit of the background of what happened and then, what's happened since?
Yeah. So I'll try and make it as brief as I can. You're more than welcome to cut it up however you need to. But cool. I was living in Los Angeles for 3 years and got to a point down there where I just felt a calling to come home. That's hippy dippy or whatever, but I just knew that my time there was done and that I just really needed to get back to my roots and get back to the wilderness and the wild. And so I moved home to Oregon, and my family has had a little cabin on the McKenzie River, sort of in the Willamette Valley area. And my mom was like, why don't you just live at the river house for a little while and save up money to buy a house on the coast, which is really obviously where I want to be. And I was like, wow, thank you so much. That's amazing. So that's what I was doing. And then I was out backpacking 8 hours away in September of 2020. And this wildfire, which was spawned by insanely high winds, just blew through the area absolute, just the craziest fire you can imagine. 50 mile per hour sustained winds with 70 plus mile per hour gusts. I don't know what that is in kilometers, but it's a lot of heavy wind. Our house burned to the ground. I lost I lost everything really in terms of material possession type thing, and all of my hard drives and images. Um, and I had nowhere else to go but move home to Bend. It was it was kind of my only option. And so that happened, lost everything. Obviously, I'm dear friends with Chris Burkard, and he set up a big GoFundMe for me, which was insanely well received. And I didn't receive any insurance money or anything. So that was it for me.
Yeah.
And so massive thank you to anybody that's listening that contributed to that, because that sort of helped me get back on my feet a little bit. But yeah, man, it was pretty, like I said, I truly believe everything happens for a reason. And I never had any reason to come back to Bend. I mean, it's always been my home and my family's here and I love it, and the mountains. And even when I lived on the coast, I would come back and stay for weeks on end to snowboard and stuff. But if that fire wouldn't have happened, I never would have met Taylor, who's my girlfriend. And I just proposed to her in Ireland a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And I truly believe like sometimes in life, hey, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm pumped. She's more than I ever could have asked for. So so for me, that's like, if that wouldn't have happened, I probably never would have met this person who's like more important to me than any image, any 69 Volkswagen, any motorcycle, anything could ever be that I lost in those fires, So I feel like in life, sometimes when things happen to us and we don't know why, I feel like oftentimes we never really find that answer, but then sometimes the answer is like as obvious as a slap across the face, And for me, that's kind of how the river house burning feels at this point, now that it's 2 years past and I'm engaged and I'm feeling comfortable being back home. As much as I want to live by the ocean, like, can't really complain about where I live. It's an amazing place. So I'm very blessed and fortunate. And while it was a awful experience that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, I think nothing but good has come from it. So
yeah, man, it's an amazing perspective. And I'm stoked that brought Taylor into your life. That's unreal.
It is unreal. It is unreal, man.
Yeah. You touched on a bit of the reflection as well, as far as like what things happen for a reason is where it's come from. Has the 2 years being reserved from it, obviously, I mean, the reality is like losing, I mean, stuff is stuff, right? But losing like the images and everything, like it's still going to suck. But has it changed?
Oh, dude, it sucks, man.
Has it changed your approach to anything in life, just in general, like this kind of knowledge now that things, in inverted commas, I mean, number one, there's actual physical things, like just stuff that you own, like your furniture. And obviously you've got, maybe heirlooms or like old photos, like not just even your photos. There's things that still have sentimental value. But also then with your photography, there is this reality that you can lose stuff. Has it changed your perspective on other things like moving forward? Even with your image making, is it just a lot more about, like thinking about being in the moment of like actually taking the photos and those experiences, because there is a potential that the actual tangible thing that comes away from it can be lost?
It has. I mean, I think throughout my photography career, whether I'm standing on a beach in Oregon or Washington or Alaska or Chile or Ireland or whatever, I'm kind of just the type of person that really does appreciate where I'm at when I'm at those places. Yeah. So I've always been very, very thankful and felt very fortunate to be in those places and do what I do. But in terms of post fire, it's just compounded, right? Like you just like stop and take it all in, and which I've always done, but yeah. And then if it's changed anything, I've got a fireproof safe inside of a fireproof safe that I keep my hard drives in at the house. And
you got some cloud storage and that kind of stuff as well.
Exactly. Got some cloud storage, and luckily I had this printer, Phil, God bless his soul, man. Like, he kept every image, every high-res image that I ever sent him for printing. So while it doesn't come close to what I lost, like, it feels really, really good to have some of those, marquee McInnis images in high-res form still, because he and Bay Photo got me a ton of high-res images back too. So there's a lot of images that I dearly miss, a lot of experiences that were
Yeah.
truly once in a lifetime experiences where I lost the entire catalogs. But
Yeah.
what can you do, man? You just pick up and move on.
I know that's it's amazing, but because it's really it's incredible to hear it from you. So can you tell us a little about so Island X and everything? That's all happened like post all of this happening. So like how did that experience come about? How was that? Like the film's amazing and just like the footage just looks like just it was such an insane experience. But can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Scott. That whole experience actually spanned the fire because our first trip up there was October of 2019, and then we were going to go back in 2020, but of course, we all know what happened to 2020. No one was going anywhere. And then the fire happened, and I lost all of the raw images. But luckily, I had sent a batch of images from that first trip to the Surfers Journal, who inevitably, obviously, published the whole story for us. So they were kind of our media partner on this thing since day one. And so they had like 300 DPI JPEGs that all I had to do was use the software to kind of enlarge for print. So luckily, saved the selects from that first trip. And then we went back to Island X in December of 2021 and sort of finished the whole thing. And before we went back, Ben and Brian, the filmer and the editor of the movie, had come up to Oregon and sort of filmed some stuff around Blue River where the fire was. And Ben was kind of telling me like, this movie sort of needed a story, and this is a pretty powerful story. So hate to break it to you, but movie is going to you're going to be tied into this thing a lot more than you thought you were going to be.
Yeah. Cool.
But that's just Ben, Ben's a remarkable storyteller, and he can find those stories and really kind of make something, really compelling out of, whatever it is. He's just a phenomenal storyteller. So I trusted him, trusted him with all my heart. So that's kind of came about unexpectedly that the movie was kind of going to be about me and I was going to narrate it. But I mean, is what it is, I guess.
When you filming this stuff over there, like how long are you there for? And like how, in reality, like how fortunate are you to get waves like that? One of my favorite moments in the movie is that like one of the surfers is standing outside of one of the huts and he's like, oh, we've got some northerly winds this morning. Hopefully it turns like offshore. And then like a new track comes in. It's just this water view of this epic wave, like starting to break with like the backlight, and just that whole session was just amazing. It's like, how lucky in retrospect are you to get that in the time that you pick to go there?
Yeah. Well, the first part of that question, each trip was scheduled to be 2 weeks. The first one in October of 2019 was, and then weather really played a factor in getting to and from the island in 2021. So I think our trip only ended up being 9 days, but we surfed every single day. And one of my favorite things about that whole trip is, for those that didn't get the opportunity to read the Surfers Journal article, Pete DeVries has a quote which is just amazing. He's like, this is the first time in my life I've ever done a trip and I haven't done a single air. So it was just tubes and turns, and mainly tubes for those entire 9 days. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, we scored really, really hard. And second part of that question, the island is just remarkable how the swell wraps around it. And it's battered with wind. So it's just wind swell. But the wind swell is so strong and so local and so consistent that it wraps around to really anywhere that's going to be offshore. So I think it's pretty consistent. I mean, at least it was for each of our trips. So, I mean, there's a couple, Ricardo, who was from the island, born and raised, he's like, you guys got so lucky. Like, I've never seen it like this for so long. So who knows? I could just be, jaded because of how good we got it. But I think there's plenty of waves up there.
Yeah. See, on that same thing about the experience, so the next image that I want to have behind me, along with this Chris Burkard image, is the one you call Mulcoy's World. I think it's the one that was on the cover of Surfer. Can you I was thinking maybe we might even like
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
flash it even up now so people can see it. Can you take me through that? Like that's just such an insane scene. Can you just share what that moment's like? Like, are you just when you see that unfolding in front of you, are you just freaking out with stoke? Like, what's the what's happening?
Oh, I mean, man, we couldn't even. That thing was, again, like, not to get too woo woo or whatever, but you talk about moments in your life that are just for you and your
Hmm.
friends. I mean, that was one of them. I mean, that's not even a wave. It was a pile of sand that came out of nowhere at the top of this spit, and for whatever reason was there when we were there with the right
Yeah.
swell and the right conditions. And truth be told, the guys actually went up to try and get it again like 2 weeks later or something, and it was still there. And then they went back again and it was gone. So I think maybe it lasted, 3 weeks, maybe a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of those moments in life where you're just like, I have no idea how this is even happening, but I'm so
Yeah.
thankful to be here. Again, one of those once in a lifetime experiences. Just that was absolutely crazy. And all all thanks to Josh, Josh Mulcoy, who sort of spearheaded all of us going up to that zone in Alaska a handful of times and really spending time on the ground to document it and going up for the right swells and learning what the right swells were. And yeah, it was a process, but man, it sure paid off in the end.
Yeah. That's unreal. Cool.
And that's to this day the only cover I've ever had, like any cover of like an American-based surf magazine. I was lucky enough to get the cover to Tracks magazine down in Australia with that
Yeah.
same a trip from an image from that same trip. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was pretty cool too. Kind of like blows your mind when you think about it.
Yeah. That's unreal. So yeah, just another like bit of a fun question because part of this whole series is I want to be discovering more photographers and for the people watching as well. So for yourself, do you have any? I mean, you can maybe tell a little bit about like how you started out, like with Chris Burkard, but even beyond that, you have some photographers that have inspired you along the way. And then the second part of that question: are there any photographers that we probably don't know about that maybe they're people from around your area or just some other people that are kind of like lesser known that we should look up?
Yeah, I mean, we briefly spoke earlier about that night on the coast when I was photographing the surf that was a bit out of my league and it was all backlit and howling offshore and beautiful. And I got home that night and sort of decided, like, really in that moment, like, I'm going to be a surf photographer. And I was just like sort of hell bent on making it happen. So I sat down in front of the computer that night with a little yellow legal pad that my dad's always gave me, and expected to write down like a bunch of names of surf photographers that really inspired me. And after I don't even know how long of relentless searching on the internet, I had two names written down. One of them was Chris Burkard, and the second one was Jeremy Koreski. So those were the two dudes that really had work already that kind of spoke to me and that I could see like a sort of like a kinship with, I guess, like, because I had already taken a lot of really pretty photos of the coast. I just had never decided like, oh, this is what I want to do professionally. So I saw their work. I was like, oh, wow, I sort of have images that kind of blend the both of these guys' work. And so, yeah, I reached out to both of them and they were both really nice. But Chris was like, well, funny you should email. My wife and I were just talking about how I should do some workshops or something. He's like, you want to kind of be like my first dude? You can come down here and give me $100 a day for as many days as you want. And I was like, man,
Wow.
that's so expensive, back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I stayed for like 3 days and left with a list of contacts. Like, he really kind of spearheaded the whole thing for me in one way or another, just because he gave me, a ton of tips on photography, but also sort of just a lot of lessons about how to approach people, how to send work, how to establish your rates, just like a lot of tips that still to this day I think about, and I've told him time and time again how thankful I am for all of his help.
Yeah.
through the years, but he always just kind of brushes it off. But yeah, he really helped me a lot in those early days. And he's still an inspiration to me. I mean, the guy's just a force, he's he's on such a different level. I don't think any of us can really even understand it unless you're also at that level. But yeah, thank you, Berkey. He's a wonderful human and a wonderful friend, and somebody that I really owe a lot of success to.
I was going to say, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are going to be like, oh wow, like he learned under Chris Burkard, and we'll be like, that's amazing. But I mean, the first part of that story is still that thing that you said, where you wrote it down on the piece of paper and you reached out to him and you made that contact and did that thing. So I think that's like a really important takeaway from this kind of stuff as well. Like, I mean, that stuff doesn't happen without putting yourself out there and making that move.
Well, again, and that's just what you have to do. You have to be vulnerable. I can't express that enough. You have to go out of your comfort zone and be like, I mean, I'm kind of like, I don't know. You really do have to like put yourself out there, even if it's uncomfortable, because that kind of stuff isn't really come natural to me. So yeah, but you got to do it. I don't know what else to say. You just kind of have to do it.
Yeah. Cool. And and any photographers that we might not know about that you kind of can shout out?
So many photographers, man. I like so many different genres of photography. Keeping it in the surf world, I think my dear friend, also a West Coast guy, Russell Holiday.
Oh yeah.
Russell's work in the surf world is really, really, really unique and good. And I think he's sort of pushing the boundaries with surf photography, kind of in a more non-traditional sense, lots of abstract work, lots of really heavy edits, that work really, really well with the compositions. His stuff is just phenomenal. He came out with a book not long ago, and I don't know if he has any left, but Russell Holiday's work is just incredible. I really like a lot of the old school, like fashion photographers too. I've got a whole like bookcase worth of fashion photography books, from Peter Lindbergh to Guy Bourdin to Tim Walker, Henrik Purin. I mean, just there's so much to love about fashion photography for me. And I think that kind of came about after I started doing more commercial work, where I was shooting more clothing and men and women and on body and on location and stuff. I was like, well, this is so out of my normal realm, but I'm so excited about it. And I'm so fascinated and obsessed with it. I want to see what all these legendary people have been doing, So, there's so much to learn from, there's so many amazing photographers and so many different avenues of photography that have come before us that, really speak to me. And I just really love their work. Even if it's unlike anything I'll ever do, I still think you can draw inspiration from that stuff. Cole Barish is another person that's, I really admire people that kind of make a living with a combination of editorial, commercial, but also personal work, and Cole has done a phenomenal job about finding interesting projects that he wants to work on that end up being, he gets paid for. I don't know how much, but and blends it with fine art photography with prints and stuff. His whole program is, again, another one of those where I'm just like, man, this is on a completely different level, I could just, you don't want to get me started about photographers that I like.
No, that's awesome. It's just, I love that, like the inspiration. I was literally just chatting to an Aussie girl, Katie Shearer, who's actually just heading over to the States she's one of the 5 finalists in the Follow the Light Awards that's happening like next week.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing. And when I was asking her about her inspiration, she was talking about Sylvia Plath, who's a poet. And and she's like, from her poems, that the words and stuff, she kind of uses that almost as her inspiration behind like a lot of her image making as well. And that's just like, it's fascinating where you can draw the inspiration from. Like, it doesn't have to be straight from surf photography alone. Like, you can bring so many elements in.
Yeah, man, not at all. 100%. I think me being such a visual person, such a visual learner, I think that, like, all types of visual media help me, whether it's like a movie or a TV show or a painting or a drawing or something like that. You know, I can draw lots of inspiration for that, but I can totally see how somebody could be inspired by words to go and then create visual imagery, you know, from that inspiration. That's awesome.
Yeah, unreal. Cool. Well, man, this has been super inspiring. Just to wrap it up in a nice little bow, actually, the last time that we did like a written interview, the last words in your interview were, if you're not having fun, if you're not loving what you're doing, do something else. And I reckon that's just so like simple, like it's just such a simple phrase, but like maybe just to wrap it all up, if you can just kind of like give us your sort of final perspective on that as a concept.
Man, I mean, life is short, you know, it really is. I'm almost 42. I'll be 42 next week, and I still feel like a 22-year-old Grom, you know, but the reality is life is really, really short. And I just think it's up to us to make the most of our lives, you know, no matter what your situation is. Nobody's going to do anything for you. Like, you have to do it yourself, you know? I mean, sure, people, you can get help and everything, but in terms of decision making and putting your foot down and putting your mind to something and setting goals and achieving those goals, nobody's going to do that for you. Like, you have to be the person that chooses what you do. And life's too short to do anything that you don't love, you know? At least for me, you know, and I'm not saying that people that work a 9 to 5 or whatever don't love what they do. I'm sure lots of people do. Totally. But for me, it's just that realization that if I hadn't chosen photography and I wasn't continuing down this path, I probably wouldn't love what I was doing. So it's kind of more of a personal mantra than like, hey, everybody should do this. But it's something that I really believe in.
For sure. And that's amazing. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. This has been such an inspiring conversation. I'll link some stuff down below. So
thank you, Scott. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Where can people watch Island X at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest thing for people to do is just to go to islandxfilm.com, and that'll take you to everything you need to know about the film. And I think from there, it has links to Amazon, Apple TV, and I don't want to say any others in case I'm wrong, but I know those are the biggest 2 platforms that it's on right now. Yeah. And then I made a around 200 page coffee table book about Island X, appropriately entitled Island X. And people can, people can find that at islandxbook.com. And it's shipping pretty much worldwide. It's through Shopify. There's some countries that it doesn't ship to, but New Zealand and Oz and lots of other places are a part of where it will ship. So yeah, man, that was a labor of love, and shout out to my designer, Allison Gates, for putting up with me through the process, man. That was, that was a big one.
Amazing, man. Yeah. I'll link it all like in the description so people can find it. And yeah, man, thank you so much again. This has been amazing. And I think it's going to inspire and help a lot of people. And yeah, hopefully some new people can find out about your work, and yeah, just keep doing your thing. Thanks very much, man.
Hey, thank you very much, Scott. I plan on doing nothing else. So doing my thing is what it'll be.
Awesome. Cheers, brother.